What was the motivation behind it?
That quietly shook African politics. Liberia, Africa's oldest republic, made a diplomatic move no one expected. Instead of sending its foreign minister to Washington, Paris, or London, Liberia sent its top diplomat to Ouagadougou. This was not a random decision. It was a powerful signal. For more than a century, Liberia has been closely linked to the United States. Its flag looks similar. Its political system follows American ideas. Its economy depends heavily on the US dollar. Because of this history, Liberia has always looked west when making major foreign policy decisions. That is why this visit surprised so many people. This was not a routine meeting or a courtesy visit. It was a statement, a quiet one, but a strong one. It suggested that Liberia was beginning to rethink where real partnership and real solutions might come from. Instead of asking for support from powerful foreign capitals, Liberia chose to sit with another African nation and talk as equals. This moment mattered because it challenged old habits. For decades, African diplomacy followed a pattern. Important talks happened outside the continent. Approval was often sought from former colonial powers. Liberia's visit broke that pattern. It raised an important question across Africa. If Liberia, with its deep Western ties, can look inward toward Africa, then what is stopping other countries from doing the same? This single visit suggested that Africa's future conversations may no longer happen far away, but right here on African soil. Liberia's decision was not just about geography, it was about history. Liberia was created in the 19th century by freed African Americans, with strong support from the United States. From the very beginning, its political and economic systems followed American models. For generations, Liberia was seen as America's most loyal partner in Africa. Because of this, Liberia often stayed away from Pan-African movements. While other African nations talked about independence, unity, and resistance, Liberia remained close to Washington. This loyalty was seen as a strength. But over time, many Liberians began to question it. They started asking hard questions. If Liberia was so close to powerful Western nations, why was the country still struggling? Why were roads broken, hospitals weak, and electricity expensive? Why were young people unable to find good jobs? By choosing Burkina Faso over Washington, Liberia showed it was willing to question old loyalties. This did not mean rejecting the West completely. It meant realizing that history should not control the future forever. Inherited alliances are easy to follow. They feel safe, but they can also become chains. Liberia's move showed courage. It showed that respect does not only come from tradition, but from choosing what works today. This moment told Africa something important. Loyalty should be based on results, not history. Partnerships should be built on mutual respect, not dependency. Liberia was not turning its back on the world. It was simply choosing to stand on its own feet and look toward Africa for answers. For decades, Liberia was promised progress. Strong alliances, foreign aid, and international support were supposed to bring development. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. Liberia's economy is small and fragile. Electricity is expensive and unreliable. Many roads are damaged or unfinished. Hospitals lack equipment. Schools are overcrowded. These are not small problems. They affect daily life. Most young people work in the informal sector. They sell goods on the street, do small jobs, or depend on family support. There is little security and no clear future. Even educated young people struggle to find stable work. This created deep frustration. People began to notice the contradiction. Liberia stayed loyal. Liberia followed the rules, but Liberia did not see real change. This gap between promises and reality slowly created disappointment. By 2025, this disappointment reached a breaking point. People were no longer satisfied with speeches or aid projects that never transformed the system. They wanted real development, not survival. This is why the visit to Burkina Faso mattered. It was not about copying another country. It was about learning from African solutions instead of waiting for foreign ones. Liberia's unmet promises pushed the country to explore new paths. More than 60% of Liberia's population is under the age of 25. This is the most important fact in the entire story. Young people are the ones living with the consequences of old decisions. They grew up after the Civil War. They were told that peace and democracy would bring opportunity. But many of them are still unemployed or underpaid. They feel stuck. Unlike older generations, today's youth are connected. They see what is happening across Africa. They see countries trying new ideas. They ask why Liberia should remain dependent when others are experimenting with self-reliance. This generation is not angry without reason. They are tired of waiting. They want dignity. They want jobs. They want a future at home, not across dangerous migration routes. When Liberia reached out to Burkina Faso, young people understood the message immediately. To them, it meant courage. It meant choosing hope over habit. This youth-driven disillusionment is not negative. It is powerful. It is pushing leaders to think differently. It is forcing new conversations, and it may become the strongest force shaping Africa's future. For many years, Burkina Faso was described in the same way by global media. Poor, unstable, unsafe. A country that needed help, supervision, and foreign troops to survive. Most people outside Africa knew very little about it, beyond headlines filled with fear. That image began to change after Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power. He did not arrive with fancy speeches or polished diplomacy. He arrived with a simple message: Burkina Faso must stand on its own feet. Instead of depending on foreign soldiers, his government chose to reorganize its own army. Instead of waiting for aid, it asked its people to participate directly in rebuilding the nation. This approach shocked many observers. Critics said it was impossible. Supporters said it was overdue. Slowly, something unexpected happened. Ordinary people across Africa began to pay attention. Not because Burkina Faso suddenly became rich, but because it became confident. It stopped apologizing for wanting control over its future. This change in image mattered deeply to Liberia. Liberia saw a country that had fewer advantages, fewer international allies, and harsher geography, yet was still trying to reclaim dignity. That contrast was powerful. Burkina Faso was no longer just a problem country. It became a symbol, a reminder that Africa does not have to accept the labels given to it. That transformation in perception is what made Liberia's interest natural, not strange. Security has always been one of Africa's most painful challenges. In the Sahel region, violence from extremist groups spread for years despite the presence of foreign troops. Instead of improving, the situation kept getting worse. Burkina Faso made a risky decision. It asked foreign forces to leave and chose to handle security on its own terms. Many outsiders said this would lead to chaos. The opposite happened. The government reorganized its defense strategy and worked closely with local communities. Citizens were no longer treated as spectators. They became part of the solution. Villages helped with intelligence. Communities supported local defense units. Within a few years, Burkina Faso reclaimed nearly 70% of territory that had been under militant control. This was not perfect or peaceful everywhere, but it was progress that people could see. What made this important was not just military success. It was ownership. Security was no longer outsourced. It was national. For Liberia, this lesson mattered deeply. Liberia knows what instability looks like. It knows the cost of depending on external forces to keep peace. Burkina Faso's experience showed that security rooted in national participation can work. This did not mean copying tactics. It meant learning the principle. True stability grows from inside, not from foreign bases. One of the most powerful moments in Burkina Faso's journey came when the government launched the Patriotic Support Fund. Instead of borrowing endlessly, it asked its own people to contribute. Businesses, farmers, traders, and citizens responded. More than $600 million was raised internally to support security and national defense. This shocked the world. For decades, Africans were told they were too poor to fund their own priorities. This moment proved otherwise. It showed that dignity has value, and people will invest in it when they believe in the cause. This idea went beyond money. It changed psychology. People felt ownership. They were not waiting for help. They were building strength together. Liberia watched closely. Liberia depends heavily on foreign loans and aid. Seeing Africans finance Africans planted a powerful idea. What if development did not always begin with debt? This did not mean rejecting cooperation. It meant changing who leads it. African-funded sovereignty became a new model, one based on trust between citizens and the state. Burkina Faso did not walk this path alone. Along with Mali and Niger, it formed the Alliance of Sahel States. At first, this alliance focused on security, but it quickly grew into something bigger. It became a political and economic statement. African countries choosing to coordinate without asking for permission. Together, these nations control vast resources: gold, uranium, oil, and farmland. Alone, each country struggled. Together, they began to imagine strength. The alliance challenged an old belief that Africa cannot cooperate without external supervision. The AES became a living experiment in African self-organization. For Liberia, this alliance was eye-opening. It showed what regional unity could look like when driven by necessity, not ideology. It offered a new center of gravity inside Africa. Liberia's outreach was not about joining immediately. It was about learning, about connecting to a movement that believed Africa could protect, fund, and organize itself. This alliance changed the conversation. Africa was no longer only reacting, it was beginning to design. Liberia's move toward the Sahel was not only political, it was deeply economic. For years, Liberia's economy depended on exporting raw materials like rubber and iron ore. These resources left the country with little value added, little job creation, and little long-term growth. When Liberia looked at the Sahel, it saw something different. It saw landlocked countries rich in resources, but blocked from easy access to global markets. This is where Liberia realized its strategic importance. Liberia has something the Sahel does not: direct access to the Atlantic Ocean, deep water ports, trade routes, geography that can connect Africa's interior to the world. Liberia proposed a bold idea: use its ports Monrovia, Buchanan, and Greenville as gateways for Sahelian countries. Gold, uranium, agricultural goods, and manufactured products could flow directly to global markets. This was not charity, it was mutual benefit. Sahel countries would reduce costs and dependency. Liberia would become a regional trade hub, creating jobs, logistics industries, and infrastructure growth. Experts estimated such a Sahel-Atlantic corridor could generate more than $15 billion annually. For Liberia, this meant moving beyond survival toward strategy. This vision showed maturity. Liberia was no longer asking, "Who will help us?" It was asking, "What can we offer Africa?" That shift in thinking is the foundation of real development. One of Liberia's most powerful proposals challenged Africa's economic habits. Instead of turning automatically to the IMF or World Bank, Liberia suggested African-funded development. The idea was simple but radical. African problems should be financed by African money. Through regional banks, diaspora bonds, and sovereign wealth funds, Africa could begin funding its own priorities. This mattered because loans often come with conditions that limit policy choices, conditions that delay progress, conditions that keep countries dependent. Liberia understood this deeply. Its economy has long been tied to the US dollar. Changing that relationship was not easy. But the country began to see that financial sovereignty was part of political sovereignty. This did not mean rejecting cooperation. It meant choosing leadership. Africa leading, partners supporting, not controlling. For young people, this idea was powerful. It suggested pride, ownership, responsibility. It said Africa is not poor in ideas or resources. It is poor in control. Liberia's proposal signaled a mental break. Development would no longer be imported. It would be built. When news of Liberia's Sahel engagement spread, the strongest reaction came from young people. In April 2025, thousands of youths filled the streets of Monrovia. They were not protesting. They were supporting. Their message was clear. Africa, for Africans. What shocked observers was the symbolism. Many carried images of Ibrahim Traoré alongside Liberian leaders. This was unheard of in the past. Young people saw in the Sahel something they had never been offered before: hope without permission, dignity without aid, opportunity without leaving home. Across Africa, the reaction spread. Students in Ghana debated resource control. Youth in Nigeria discussed reducing dollar dependence. In Senegal, videos went viral repeating one message: if the Sahel can rise, so can we. This was not about one leader. It was about belief. A belief that Africa's future does not need validation from outside. For the first time, many young Africans began imagining success at home instead of escape abroad. That psychological shift may be the most important change of all. Liberia's decision forced Africa to face a hard truth. Dependency is comfortable, but it is costly. Sovereignty is difficult, but it is empowering. This moment is bigger than Liberia, bigger than Burkina Faso. It represents a continental crossroads. Africa can continue waiting, or it can begin building. The Sahel experiment is not perfect. It faces risks, pressure, resistance, but it has already achieved something rare. It changed the conversation. Africa is no longer only reacting to global power. It is beginning to shape its own path. Liberia's turn toward the Sahel